Hello everyone. These days everybody is talking about Syria,
Syrian
Out of Syria.
Syria,
especially post-Assad Syria. What's going to happen? Whether there's going to be a democracy, or there's going to be a theocracy? Are there going to be an Islam system, or who's going to replace Assad? Is it going to be federalism? Or what's going to happen to Shia, to the Kurds, to the Druze, to the Alawite, to the many different components of Syria? Are not sure what's going to happen, what's going to come to them after the fall of Assad, if Assad has fallen. But what if I tell you the Syrian leaders are getting together and writing a democratic and progressive constitutions? Muslims, Christians, and Arabs, Kurds, all of them are agreed on a democratic constitutions. Many of you may think that I'm crazy or this is not going to happen, this is a dream. Well, that happened, but 100 years ago. Let's go back to history. What happened in Syria and why it's relevant now. Before going into the details, who's Jolani, Assad is gonna fall, what's gonna happen to the Syrian Kurds, the America, the Russia, Turkey, let's go back to what happened 100 years ago in Syria and why it is related to what is happening today. When the Ottoman Empire fell apart after the World War I, there were a lot of excitement in Syria. Syrian leaders got together. They were actually inspired by the Wilson's 14-point self-determination, and they were actually promised by the European powers Arab independence. The Syrian leaders back then, Lebanon was part of Syria and Jordan, and the greater Syria, which was bigger than the current Syria. The Muslims, the Christians, all the components of the Syria, they were working together. They actually drafted a very progressive constitutions in even to today's standard. In the constitution, they had women's education rights, protection of all minorities, equal religious rights for all religious groups in Syria. That's in 1920. Yes, that was possible. A democratic monarchy system. Leaders like Rashid Rida, the Islamic thinker, a reformist. Actually, he was a scholar, and Hassan Banna, the founder of Muslim Brotherhood, was his student. Because many believe that after the fall of the Syrian democracy, Banna saw how Rashid Rida and his friends and his teacher destroyed their dream of democratic Syria, reconciliations of the Islamic principles with the democratic principles, and that he came with the idea of the Muslim Brotherhood, that there need to be an Islamic revival and away from the Western values democracy. Anyway, Faisal was elected as a king, and they drafted the constitutions. Actually was more of a replica of the US constitutions. Many of the Syrian leaders, they were actually students at the American University in Beirut, so they were inspired by the US constitution. They studied the US constitutions, and they put many parts of the Bill of Rights of the US constitutions and integrated into new modern Syrian constitutions, and created a very progressive constitution in Syria. They were like kind of inspired by the federal system in the United States as well. So it was not a centralized, even democratic monarchy system. Anyway, but that was not aligned with the colonial powers' interests, especially French and Britain. The French and Britain, after the World War I, they divided the Middle East according to the Sykes-Picot, and they drew maps the way they liked. And the French, they gave the leader, democratic Syria, two choices: either surrender or confront French army. They confronted French army. They were destroyed in one day.
Allenby's forces entered Damascus,
and the Syrian democracy died in its cradle. This is history, but it has an impact. Actually, the current Syrian leaders, they can go back to that draft proposal. I think that's still relevant, and that's still one of the most progressive draft of constitution in the Middle East. If still they can go back to it. Imagine if somebody asked you, anybody that said that Middle East and democracy are not compatible and it's not going to work. Remember that Syria-1920. This untold story of Syria and many others, you can find it in the book, which actually a very intensive and extensive research by Elizabeth Thompson, because she did a great job going back to the archives of Syria, of the discussions of the constitution, the drafting constitution back then in 1920, and many unknown sources she found and incorporated in her research under the title of How the West Stole Democracy from Arab, which has a lot of interesting stories. I would like to just to talk about a little bit about the history, that democracy was possible in 1920, and it was progressive, acceptable. It was combined of a Western democracy, Islamic virtues, and local culture, and all Syrians were able to live together peacefully in a democratic system. But that system was not destroyed by internal infight. It was not destroyed by Sunni, by the Kurds and Arabs, Christians and Muslims. It was destroyed by the Western power, and the replacement was dictatorship, military coup, generals, corrupt leaders that the Syrians and the Middle East are suffering from to this day. Ask yourself a question. If the Syrian democracy was successful 100 years ago, would there be any war between Jews and Muslims? Would there be Sunni Shia conflicts in the Middle East? Would there be dictatorship or more democratic system in the region? I think the answer is clear. Had the Syrian democracy succeeded, I think there would be replica and there would be expansion of democracy in the Middle East to other countries, not dictatorship. Thank you.